Good morning, Julie Coer.
Good morning, Jason Padgett. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Are you
Yeah.
are you not wearing a Bears shirt today?
No, I know my angle. I changed my angle, but no,
Okay.
Chicago Bears, of course. Because the last 3 times since we started doing this New Year, new rotation, I've worn something Bears related, and there have been wins. So
Okay.
we'll see. We are hoping for a Bears win today against the Rams. So we'll see.
Well, I have on my You're Not Alone sweatshirt. That's a new campaign we have at Phoenix that Nate is real passionate about. Apparently, 80% of the deaths by suicide in the United States are men. And so we're trying
Definitely
to
not surprised.
target that demographic and give them a safe space where they feel more. We're going to have like a garage day where we can all come in and work on our cars together and just kind of bond with each other. Maybe some video games in the other room, like just something that's a little less behavioral healthy. I don't think it'll be any surprise to most people that men have a tendency not to like to sit down with a therapist and pour their heart out, right? Or they want to feel like they're doing something and they're bringing something to the table, which sitting in a circle and talking about your problems oftentimes doesn't resonate. Not that either of those, we need more of different kinds of therapy, not less, but
Yeah.
we want to reach the demographic that struggles with that.
Yeah, no, and I fully support that. And that's interesting because to tie it into AI, I wonder what the statistics are. And you may know, because I know the conversation has been most general population right now are using things like ChatGPT as like a personal counselor kind of thing. I wonder what the statistics are on that of male versus female. Do you happen to know?
Last time I saw it, it's bounced back and forth. I have heard those statistics. It has bounced back and forth. I think it's fairly decent equilibrium. Now, I will say ChatGPT just released ChatGPT Health, and Anthropic released Claude Health as well. So I think the aim that they're trying to bring in is that we have all these disparate health systems. So you have some of your stuff on your Apple Watch. Franciscan has half of your health records. IU Health has half of your health records. So I think the question going forward, and I do think that convenience and help will win over privacy, is are you willing to give all those access to all those record points to a large language model so that it then has like a full view of where you are health wise and can give you recommendations, which I think the companies are framing as then you can go to your doctor a little better informed and ask better questions. And I think the doctors are more annoyed than the software engineers. So the same thing happens with vibe coding, right? Like somebody who doesn't know how to use write code in a company will vibe up an app, a CEO or a project manager, and then take it to the engineers and be like, "Hey, make this work," right? And it's like this half-ass like shell of an app, and now the engineer's like, well, it's not that easy. I'm like, I have to connect this to a full data source. Like, this is a bug, that's a bug. I think they have been more welcoming of it than doctors. I've heard the doctors are somewhat annoyed, but some of that plays into ego as well. If I'm just being 100% transparent,
Oh
like
no.
they think they know it all.
Well, and it's really interesting because as somebody who has seen specialists, and then you also have a GP, and I'm a
Mm-hmm.
firm believer in it takes a village because they are specialists, right? So they do know everything they need to know about like that one thing, right? So I do believe you need an overall view. And as somebody who's relocated so many times in my life, and I know you've relocated too, that's a problem. Like now I have to catch up this new doctor on
Mm-hmm.
everything that's happened. And I don't know the specifics of it. I don't know the codes for it. I don't know what, that GP in Virginia said versus when I lived in Illinois. I don't know. So I find that interesting. And it's definitely, I think, a benefit if you have it all in one place that's easily accessible for everybody.
Yeah, I will tell you, the privacy concerns to me as someone who now don't get me wrong, there are times in my life where I was on the other side of the law and not living life good, that I would not have liked any kind of surveillance. But as someone who doesn't really do anything wrong, that's or illegal, like the privacy thing is not really that big of a deal to me. So I would much rather give up a little bit of privacy to have to be able to have all that collectively in an interface that I can ask questions to and I can run some deep research on. And so now, not every doctor thinks about everything from every angle. So you could say, let's say that you're having some gut issues. You could say, hey, research this from a gut biome, from a holistic medicine, from prescription medicine, and from from do absolutely nothing about it, but angle, right? And tell me what the outcomes are globally for people who reported having attacked the same symptoms that way. And now you have like a whole lot more information than even your top specialist is probably going to provide to go in and talk to that specialist about. And he may be like, yeah, that's like two people were asked a question in the survey you're talking about. So you can disregard that one. But you're right. This one does have some validity. I think it just opens up a lot more choice and a lot more personal empowerment.
Yeah, which I am always in support of. I've been an advocate for myself and now for, like my parents or whatever. And I'm constantly questioning and pushing, because I have certain beliefs in how I treat myself and my MS and whatever. But it's fascinating. It is fascinating to talk to specialists. Like I've talked to neurologists who aren't open to conversations about, well, how could hormones be impacting this? Or how could my diet be impacting this? Neurologists don't want to hear it. They want to tell you what they know, which is they see plaque and this is the medication that treats that. And that's not always the case. So it would be, I think, a benefit to have a resource like AI that can give you information that can allow you to make the choice to see or go the avenue in which you feel comfortable going.
Yeah, I would agree totally. And that's where security and safety and security really does become a new issue. I mean, I will tell you what I tell my boss all the time, which I'm not I mean, I use ChatGPT. I love OpenAI. I'm not an anti-Sam Altman. I think he's a great salesman. But the fact of the matter is that company is in the red big time and isn't going to be in the black for lots of years. So I don't trust a company that if they violated something, I could never sue them because they'll just claim bankruptcy. And this is where I
Mm.
think your Googles of the world start to win again because people are going to trust Google more because it's a giant company that if they make a big misstep can cover their bets and pay the piper for the misstep that they made. Whereas a newer company is going to have a lot of trouble unless they really lean into just the security side, which will probably be a vertical as well. But these big
Mm.
ass companies like, man, I don't know, IP companies, HIPAA stuff, all that stuff. Like, I'm not trusting that to some startup that's in the red. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and I'll be interested to see how, like, even smaller establishments utilize it, because like there's certain places that I will go where I have to like fill out the same form every 3 to 6 months or whatever, and I'm like, why am I filling out this form again? Like,
Yes.
where is the you know? But I know you need it to be secure, all that stuff. Like I also understand that side of it. So, but it is just funny because as a layman, right? I'm like, it would be nice if everything was in one accessible spot that I could pull up anytime I relocate, or heaven forbid there be an emergency situation when I'm traveling, to be able to be like, this is all of my medical history, or heaven for an accident or something, like they can access it on your phone
Hmm.
so they don't have to try to call your next of kin or whatever. Like I can see lots of benefits to that aspect of it if that were to come up.
I can see the EMT. Hey, chat, what's up with this chick? Like, she's pretty mangled. Can you give me a little history on her?
Yeah. Well, like just in case there's like, all of those things, right? Allergies to medications,
Yep.
like all of that stuff. Cause I know they used to, and they might still, this is a little bit more up your alley or whatever. Like they used to have like diabetics wear certain,
Bracelets.
like, yeah, bracelets. So it's just like, all this stuff could be really, really beneficial in the health world to be able to access people's stuff immediately, in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think healthcare will be the biggest humanity uh, humanity bonus impact, artificial intelligence and drug discovery, speeding up drug discovery, homogenizing, pulling down the barriers. So really what the biggest problem we have is the moats that the hospitals try to build, so that your information is trapped in their system and you have to go to them because it's hard to access their system outside of their system. And none of that is good for the consumer. We won't get into how socialism plays into that, but
Mm,
you did say something that is a great transition, which
okay.
is, the tedious work and how it would be nice to not have to fill out forms or things like that. I think in the last couple of weeks, we've actually had another ChatGPT moment that the world doesn't really realize outside of people who are using tech.
Okay.
So Anthropic created Claude Code, which is, these guys always seem to solve for software problems and coding problems before they solve for anything else, which makes sense because it's kind of their sandbox and it's what they're used to. But Claude Code can take control of your computer. It can get into your files. It can execute things for you. It can clean up. A lot of these guys have had them like clean up and order their files. I mean, it literally, without you writing any code, but in like an old, I don't know, you're so young. If
Mm,
you've seen the old like Microsoft uh, or IBM 64 computers, like how it used to look, like that DOS interface where you just have like a blue word and then a little line and then you type out, right? Okay, so that's kind of what it looks like when you're in an IDE, when you're in Cursor, or you're in one of these things that's where you're interfacing with code. You're typing in words, it's writing code, but it looks still very like computery. Okay.
okay.
So that was huge, Claude Code. And you have to have the $100 a month membership to do it. But it was basically saying, like what we've seen with vibe coding, what I was just talking about a little while ago, where I would bespoke an app like, hey, I want a daily reminder and a calorie tracker that I just spin up on my own. And I could go into a place like Cursor or Replit as a person who doesn't write code, and I could spin up, uh, if I spent enough time, a decent one, but it wasn't easy and it was not deployable. Like I couldn't stick it in the app store, right? And have
Mm,
a whole bunch. Well, Claude Code can just do it. Like, so all of a sudden, like now people who can't write code can create websites and applications that are fully functional, have data architectures behind them and everything else. And then a week and a half later, a program that Claude Code wrote is now Cowork, which takes all that computery looking stuff out of it. And now every white collar person can interact with their computer and Claude Cowork, and it can move around and do whatever you want to give it access to do. And
mm,
so we're really talking about like filling out those forms, mining your data, creating dashboards, all these things. I was just listening to Tony Robbins this morning on the All In podcast say, if you don't believe AI is going to completely disrupt this economy, you're nuts. And we're
mhm.
about to lose a whole lot of jobs. And yes, universal basic income may be a must, but people get a lot more than money from jobs. They get a sense of purpose. And it took 80 years for farming to take 80% of us from farming to the 3% that do it today. This is all going to happen in like 5 to 10 years, and we're not preparing for it at all.
Yeah, well, I don't know how you prepare for that, right? Like, I just, it's like, all right, I'm just going to show up every day and just kind of that's figure it out. Because I still, right now, it's still like a great tool,
Yeah.
right? So it's still not, you still need that human piece that like tells it to do something. So I don't know. That's interesting. How do you prepare for that?
Well, I think the way that you are, which is keep an open mind, think about what the future might look like, make sure that you at least understand the technology and can use it somewhat. And then I think we start, big change is big opportunity. It's big
Mhm.
threat and it's big opportunity. And I think you and I may have discussed this at one point in time, but I mean, if we're living in a world where everyone's uh Maslowian needs are met, right? All your basic needs are met, but there's really not, you don't have to work in order for that to happen. Well, there is a space, of course, for nonprofit sector or whatever to find new purpose for people, right? To give them something to recreate the idea of the other thing Tony said was, if you live your whole, he's concerned with this self-care thing going overboard. Like, we all have an innate desire to take care of ourselves. It's when we start caring about other people that we find some purpose in life. And so when you start taking ideas like that and saying, okay, if everyone's basic needs were met, like, what could I do that would bring value to human lives? Then we may have brand new industries that spring up. And just because you're getting universal basic income doesn't mean that you don't want to make a little bit more on top of it, if that's possible, or have something fruitful to do with your time. So I think those are the kind of conversations I don't hear happening enough, and I would like to hear happening more.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. And, that's a part of, like, you hear all these things and you learn these things about, like, oh, people don't leave a job, they leave the leadership, right? Because there's a culture thing that keeps people, with the places that they're working, because it gives you a sense of purpose. It's more than work, right? Like, I would do what I am doing with the company that I'm with without pay, because I believe in what they do and stand for, right? Like,
Because Jim's a hell of a lot of fun.
yeah, he is a he is just good people, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and his business partner, just good people, and they care about people. And so that keeps me engaged and motivated, and all of those things. So I agree. It's going to be really interesting, because I don't know on a basic level if people understand that, right? Because we've been in survival mode for so long. And, people who are having to work 2 or 3 jobs currently to even have those basic needs, what does that look like for them? Because now they have a nervous system. I don't know how
Yeah.
much you've gone down all of that understanding, but now you have an overactive nervous system that is going to have a safety net. But now, what do they do with all of that? Like, how do they work through that? Like, therapy, I think, is going to be a great avenue of growth, and educating people on, mindfulness and all of those things, so that we aren't living in this constant state of fear.
Yes. I would
Yeah.
agree. There's a Star Trek, and I'm not a Trekkie at all, but I mean, of course, I've watched them over the years, and I think it was a Next Generation where they visited a planet that was super healthy, and it kind of resonated with me as even as like probably a 15-year-old when I watched it, because they jogged everywhere they went, they meditated, like everything they did kind of had some type of either a Western or an Eastern well-being bend to it, right? Physical meets, and I think yoga, they talk about this a lot. Like, the hurt is in the muscle tissues, like the trauma's in the tissues. So I do
Oh,
think that, there's a whole new industry of, like, how do we get people moving from all different age demographics, all different, how do we create movement that resonates with different demographics, right? Like, well-being and movement. Like, Derek Sutherland and I work with him. We're both like way into Eastern stuff. We love meditation. Like, you talk about that at a level that he and I love it, and most people in Indiana's eyes roll back in the back of their head. Or like the Salvation Army told me one time, one real religious zealot, and I love the Salvation Army, but told me that I was opening myself up to demonic possession when I did
oh,
yoga, because it comes from a polytheistic religion. Like, so that's kind of where we live, right? And so how so you've got the Derricks, you've got the African American community, the Hispanic community. The Hispanic community is subjugated into, like, there's the Mexicans, and then there's people from South America. Like, all these different cultures, you're going to need all kinds of different approaches to meet them where they are in this new world. And so I do think there's unlimited possibilities, but we need to start talking about them. The same reason I say kids should be learning about AI in kindergarten through K through 12, because if we don't start the conversation and we do what we've always done, which is just be reactive, oh shit, all the jobs are gone. Now what? Like, then is when you have big problems.
yeah. I completely agree. And it is really interesting. And I know you bring up all the Eastern, because I very much, for my own purposes, have looked into, like, medical, especially when it comes to autoimmune stuff, advancements, as far as how Europe and East handles it. It's completely different from here. And
Yeah.
I admire it. And there's a lot to be said for reducing stress and mindfulness and meditation and all of that, and how it affects everything. Right. So, but then you think, like, right now, and I don't want to get into I really don't want to do like too much political stuff, but when we think about
Sure.
the universal basic income and you think about China and how it's doing right now and how its middle class is like thriving, it is just really, it's interesting conversations to have. And I don't, does any country right now that we know of actually have a UBI?
I mean, any country that's fully socialist, I think, would be the closest thing to actually more communism would be a UBI than socialism, because in
Right.
socialism you have to work and then you're taxed really heavily. So yeah, China, Cuba, North Korea. We usually associate it with a dictatorship, which takes us down a whole different, dark rabbit hole. Which is, I fully believe it's probably true. We're probably, once we pass all that, getting into more of an oligarchy where big companies are have a hell of a lot more power than the government. I mean, if this technology is, Jensen is predicting that, Jensen Wong, that this could raise GDP to like 6%, which is unheard of because of what this technology can do. Like, if they're the ones who are actually bringing all this in, then they're the ones giving us the money. Like, the only real power the government has is our need for their money and their military support. So you kind of have a collide there. And God, I
Hmm.
hate to go real dark, but if you look at a company like Andril or Palantir, like, arguably some of these tech companies could give our government a run for their money when it comes to the military stuff too. I've always said, all the rednecks that stock guns, like, good luck. You're not going to beat the United States Marine Corps, but you take 𝗲𝗏𝗯 and like his ability to build drones and things like that. Now you're talking a whole different scale of combating what currently exists as military. Sorry, I didn't mean to go all dark there. I just kind of ended up there.
No, no, that's okay. But that's an interesting, I have not gone down that rabbit hole in my brain, but it's a very real thing. I was uh thinking about how we love to throw out billionaire, right? It's the whole new whatever thing, but it's like they don't, I mean, okay, so they're worth that much. They don't actually have that cash on hand. They cannot, it could all be gone tomorrow, right? Like we saw how Tesla was impacted when people just like revolted for a moment. You know what I mean? So it's like we love to say this. And yes, they have money, but they also take money from the government. So can they do more? You know what I mean? Like, I don't, that's a very interesting thought process. And it does seem scary because they can advance the tech, but also they need the investment from somebody else. You know what I mean? Like, we're all tied together. There's all a big tangled web.
It's true. It is very true. Some of that wealth is available internationally, though, which I think is one of the reasons why they're tapping into the United Arab Emirates and the Saudis. And the Saudis, I think the Middle East is starting to realize that oil is no longer the gold standard for the most valuable thing in the world. Now it's data and energy. And so, and China's killing us on the energy side. Like, they're throwing up nuclear plants and everything. But we do have some plans. This is something that'll excite you. So I have heard some conversations around Microsoft is definitely not going to. They're going in and building data centers. They are not going to raise prices at all. They're gonna take on whatever that extra cost is for the energy. But there are people putting it out there, my boys on the All In podcast, that are like, why don't you just make it free to you take over all the energy costs when you build a data source, and now you have just given the citizens within X mile radius of your data center one hell of a reason to live near a data center, because now their energy bill just went to zero, and
Right.
it's not, it's only a percentage of what you're spending trying to power up all these NVIDIA Rubin chips anyway. And so
Yeah.
that's an interesting idea.
I would support that, obviously. I think if somebody or a company has the money to do such a thing, then do it. You know what I mean? If you want to at least help encourage people to support what you're doing, being like, I'm going to cover everybody's electric, that's pretty tempting. You know what I mean? Like, because right now, that's a heavy conversation. It is like even my electric, and I don't think it's data center related, but my electric has been going up, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I know it's winter, but
No, and Indiana has been very anti data center. Ohio has been very pro data center. So I do want to say like that uh, the framing, so they've disproven the water thing. It doesn't burn up a bunch of water. The water cooling methodologies and data centers that evaporates a whole ton of water, they don't even use that in like very many at all. You can do the research on your own if you disbelieve me. So the water thing is not real. The energy thing is real, but the jobs thing that's not real, that's sold, is people are like, well, let's say it takes 3 years to build a data center, and then it only takes like 10 people to run this huge data center. So you're not really creating long term jobs. Well, I call BS on that. Like, it does create a lot of jobs for electricians. Like, we don't even have enough electricians because all these data centers right now. Electricians are making six figures. Plumbers,
mhm.
like all that kind of stuff. Hell, kids, go into the trades if you want a lifetime job. But once you build this data center, keep in mind that the companies have to move somewhat close to it. They want to be somewhere near these new stuff. You're going to create a whole tech startup ecosystem around that data center that wants to be able to leverage that compute power that's inside there. So you are just putting a dynamic growth into your into your into your city or your town when you build one of these that is going to be long term. And as the Midwest, what I say is like, let's make sure that we have cities like Lafayette, lower crime than Indianapolis, but cities that have some cool stuff to do, have good schools, and have a low cost of living, because not everybody is going to work remotely. And so maybe some of these Silicon Valley people who have wet their whistle in their 20s, like they've lived in the dorm style, they've done their thing, but now they have kids. And I'll tell you right now, I've lived in California. I have a daughter who lives in California who's getting ready to have a kid. Once you have a kid, whether or not you want to live in California becomes a whole different conversation. Do you want them going to California public schools? Do you want them to have all the choices California offers a young person, from drugs to Mexico to just like anything you could ever want to get into? California has normalized at some level. And so you're like, maybe I'll move to the Midwest and let them grow up a little more, pr- guarded and protected. And then when they're 20 or 25, they can decide if they want to go back to the coast and their brains fully develop and they can make proper decisions. I think we have a hell of an add value to those people's lives if we keep good modernized school systems and we don't overregulate.
I don't have kids, so I have no room to comment on any of that. that you know.
But you
Mm,
do. Let me frame a question for you, okay? If you were living in Chicago,
mhm.
you're very familiar with Chicago. I know you're a huge
I've
Chicago
lived in the
fan.
city. Yep. Mhm,
Yep. And you were
mhm.
pregnant. Would your perception of how much longer you wanted to stay in Chicago be altered by the fact that you're now thinking about schools and little kids walking places and daycares?
So for me, I think it depends because it would be more about expense, right?
Mhm.
So because obviously that's what it basically comes down to most of the time, right? Because raising a kid is very expensive, and the daycare because you have to keep working, and all that stuff. I love the idea of raising a kid in diversity. Like, I love that. I grew up outside of the city. I lived in the city for a few years, and there is diversity is beautiful. It's wonderful. It helps you see things from other perspectives. So there's a part of that that's kind of priceless, but you got to be able to afford life. And, that's what it would come down to. And it is less expensive to move Indiana, or a suburb for sure.
Yeah, there's two sides to the diversity coin too. Because I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and I'm glad we left by the time I was in seventh grade because we had metal detectors in our junior high. I was already involved in gangs and gang fights from the time I was in first grade. We didn't call it a gang, but we ganged up and fought each other. And a kid got stabbed right next to me in the convenience store when an older kid was picking on me trying to play a video game. Another older kid like stabbed him with a pocket knife. Like all that stuff was very commonplace. And I had I stayed, I probably wouldn't be. I couldn't speak Spanish. I wouldn't have the appreciation that I have for the Hispanic culture, which I absolutely love, and their food. But I, had I not been there, I wouldn't have those things. Had I stayed, I'm guessing I would be incarcerated because I was headed towards very protective violence, and like I had a huge chip on my shoulder that the Midwest helped knock off. So there's some balance to inner city diversity of schools. Yeah, if you don't get any trouble or you don't get shot or stabbed or overly picked on, it's great that you got that diversity. But if you go to a school where there maybe is a little less diversity, you also have a lot of opportunity to not encounter a lot of the violence that comes with inner city schools.
I'm going to agree to disagree just because I feel like the threat is everywhere right now. And if we continue so the flip side of that, if we continue to grow this area via data centers and companies that come with it, then it's going to be growth and population growth. All of that comes with population growth, period. When you
That's
have
true.
more people in a condensed area, it increases the risk of everything. That's just math, So, there's no way to ever protect any of us from anything any day. I could walk out. I keep saying it. I hate saying it, but I could walk out on the street right now and get hit by a bus. I don't know. There's no way to protect myself I can look both ways, but like you can do what you can do, whether that's in the city, in a suburb, in a different state, but you can never predict or, really truly put anybody in like a safety bubble or anything.
I'll give you that. I now I'll throw one more at you, and I know we're coming up on the half an hour, but
Yeah.
a rising tide lifts all boats. So the diversity that you're talking about with the tech industry is not the same diversity that you get in the inner city because the industry is completely different. You're not talking about just fast food restaurants and factories and quick loan places, and like that's not really the industry that you're building up around a data center. You're building up more of a completely different level of diversity, and that may look a little different and less violent than what we get in metropolitan cities.
Except for when the original, like if you want to go all the way back when we first started the Industrial Revolution and when we started building cities and that was the idea, right? We're going to build this thing in this area. And what comes with that is more people. And that's a wild card because it doesn't matter
That's true.
if the people come for the job, you still don't know what kind of people they are. So you can't be like, oh, all tech related people are good people. We don't know. Then they're going to create more people. And you just don't know.
Oh, I want to wrap there because I just heard you say Elon's a good person. You just said all tech related people are good people.
No, I said if
Julie
that's what
just
you
propped up
believe.
Elon.
I said if that's what you believe.
She said it here.
Sure. I see what you're doing. I didn't say, yeah, we'll wrap there.
Okay. It's been fun. We'll catch up again next Sunday for release Monday. Have an awesome week, and thank you, Julie.
And go Bears.
Go Bears. The Bulls. The Bears.
Yeah.